September 2020. Jeannie Wilson of Taylorsville, North Carolina is cleaning up after game night with family and friends. She heads into her sunroom where she comes across a modern-day monster. She records this video of a foot-long snake slithering around the bottom of a 5-gallon container with 2 heads. Based on the video, the snake's heads appear to be working independently of each other. Jeannie was nearly shocked out of her skin.
I spotted him in the corner of the sunroom. I thought somebody had stepped on his head and mashed it. And I looked really close and I said, "You've got 2 heads." And it's like, wow, for a 2-headed snake to make it that long out in the wild is amazing.
Field researcher Cliff Barrickman believes that animals like this 2-headed serpent may have been the original inspiration for many of the world's most fearsome mythical monsters.
Probably the only thing scarier than a snake might be a 2-headed snake. If we look back into ancient times, you can find stories of multi-headed animals, like the multi-headed dog Carabas that guarded the gates of hell, or the Hydra, the many-headed snake monster. And I think that behind these sorts of stories is always a grain of truth.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt lays out a more sinister idea. Warning, these images could be disturbing.
I'm thinking of a Russian scientist who is able to successfully attach the head of a dog to another dog.
That would be Dr. Vladimir Demikhov, a pioneering Russian surgeon who transplanted one dog's head onto the neck of another dog back in 1968. The conjoined animals survived for 38 days.
So we can't rule out the possibility that this 2-headed snake could be the result of a similar type of experimentation.
Sadly, about 3/4 of all conjoined twins die before, during, or soon after birth. So how did the snake get this way, and how did it survive? Is this fantastic beast unnaturally lucky, or is it a bit too fantastic? First, we brought the video to Roxy Furman to assess the authenticity.
I've seen conjoined twins before of various different other species, but my initial instinct was, is this head real or not? And up until kind of halfway through, this second head is not kind of using its tongue to smell the environment. But then there was a point where the second head, its tongue comes out, and at this point you can see it's kind of wanting to move in a different direction, which then made me think this is real.
Furman says these 2-headed creatures are examples of a natural but mysterious mutation called polycephaly.
There's a lot that we still don't understand about conjoined twins. If there are 2 heads, both which have their own consciousness, then who kind of overrides the control of the body, or whether they communicate with one another as 2 individuals would.
Furman refutes the idea that this multi-headed snake could be the product of human experimentation, similar to that of Soviet scientists in the 1950s.
There's no indication of recent surgery, there's no stitches or suture marks.
So it's a real, natural-born snake. But what explains its mutation and its survival?
It seems to be doing pretty well. This is unique because we don't often see animals with 2 heads that seem to be healthy, because they don't tend to survive in the wild.
And while Conger is positive the snake isn't some bizarre experiment, she says the genetic mutation we see here may still have been caused by humans, just not intentionally.
Amphibians and reptiles, like snakes, are actually just really prone to mutation. And a lot of this has to do with environmental pollution. It's been shown that there's a number of pollutants that can actually cause malformations in wildlife, and we're seeing this increasingly today.
So, our verdict. This snake was an example of polycephaly, quite possibly caused by pollution. What became of it is this story's happy ending. Jeannie gave the snake to a friend, and here's his update. He says he named the serpent Double Trouble, and says he's alive and well.
When Double Trouble was found, he was already a few months old, so he had a good start. He's approaching a year old, and he's never refused a meal. He's just been thriving, and that's a sign that he's gonna make it and possibly live to adulthood. I always wanted a 2-headed snake, so it was kind of like a dream come true, and I've loved working with him ever since.
October 2013, South Florida, off the coast of Sanibel Island in the Gulf of Mexico. A couple is enjoying a clear day on their fishing boat when they suddenly notice something camera-worthy.
What the is that? Go, go. I don't know what that is, Dave. Just hold on.
Let's see that again. The woman heard in the video describes the creature as a giant snake-like monster, longer than 20 feet and as thick as a large utility pole. Field researcher Ken Gerhardt says reported sea monster encounters in this area date back centuries. The most famous happened in 1962.
So historically, there have been accounts of monsters and sea serpents in the Gulf of Mexico. Perhaps one of the most dramatic involves a man named Edward Bryan McCleary. McCleary and 3 of his young companions decided to take a raft out to the wreckage of a ship known as the USS Massachusetts. And out of the water came this dinosaur-like, a plesiosaur type of creature, something from prehistoric times. And according to McCleary, this creature essentially killed his 3 companions and devouring them or drowning them in fairly close proximity to where this video is alleged to have been shot.
This clip has logged more than 1 million views since it was first posted. Take a look right here. It looks scaly and like maybe it's coiled around something. The splash is quick, but it's definitely indicating something large. To help us get some clarity, let's ask our experts.
Before I would entertain the idea that this might be some sort of unknown sea monster, I would point out the fact that there are many species of known large animals that live in this area.
Based on the size of the boat and its distance from the alleged creature, our experts agree it could be as long as 30 feet.
Some people conjecture that this could be an oarfish.
The oarfish is the longest bony fish on the planet, with some specimens reaching 30 feet. But Dr. Conger says there's a problem. Oarfish are usually found at depths around 600 feet.
Most of the time when we do see them at the surface, it's because they've already been deceased and they are either floating or washed up on shore.
Conger also rules out many of the other marine mammals known to roam the shores of the Gulf.
This is a really large, tubular-looking animal that's pretty dark in color. And anything like a whale or a seal wouldn't be as undulating and as distinct as we see in this video.
Ultimately, it's the moment when it emerges that has Conger convinced.
I think the most likely possibility for this video is actually some type of a large snake that's eating another type of marine animal. When we see a large constrictor species in the water consuming a prey, it will often wrap itself around that prey and spin through the water, and this video seems to be a bit indicative of that.
Conger says this isn't just a big snake, but possibly one of the biggest. A green anaconda. They get as large as 30 feet with a 12-inch diameter and weigh more than 550 pounds. Imagine that the next time you swim in Florida. So, there you have it. This is most likely a large snake preying on a smaller sea animal, most likely a fish, though anacondas can eat animals as big as jaguars. But what do you think? February 2022, Sakon Nakhon, Thailand. A local man is on a Saturday stroll in his neighborhood when he sees something strange moving slowly in some dirty runoff. Knowing no one would believe him without proof, he reaches out to the creature with a jar and captures this. A long, tubular creature sits in some shallow water at the bottom of a barrel. It's about 2 feet long and it sure appears serpentine, but it's covered in what looks like an odd greenish fur. Let's watch that again. It rears its head and pokes a pair of tiny nostrils above the surface, and the tongue flicks out suddenly. Field researcher Ken Gerhardt fills us in on what the internet made of this fuzzy creature.
One theory is that we may be looking at an example of a real, genuine dragon. Many of our dragons in mythologies around the world are chimeras. That is, they combine different features from different types of animals. For example, a serpentine or reptilian body shape, but often adorned with mammal-like features like claws or hair, a beard, sometimes wings.
But aren't dragons usually bigger? This creature looks relatively small.
We have a type of dragon known as the basilisk, or the little king, which is a very tiny type of dragon that comes out of the Middle East. One could make an argument that this is representative of one of these small dragon stories.
One of the most compelling things about dragons is that they've been documented in mythologies around the world. It's hypothesized this may be because all cultures feared snakes. But some say this collective consciousness about dragons indicates our ancestors all actually encountered the same fantastic creatures. Let's turn to our experts for their thoughts on the reality of this serpentine beast. First, we turn to our veteran forensic analyst, Michael Primo, to determine whether this creature is real or just a clever digital mock-up.
Through physical aspects of the scene analysis, lens flaring from the camera, as well as lighting that was produced from behind the camera, the verdict is that this is an authentic video.
An authentic furry serpent? If we're gonna go there, let's talk about chimeras. They don't all have to be dragons, and in fact, there are some examples of chimeras in nature. We have the narwhal, the famed sea unicorn, a whale with a tusk reaching up to 10 feet in length. Some of these creatures are so unbelievable that even scientists doubted their existence. Take the duck-billed platypus, for example. Initially, 19th century naturalists were sure that specimens sent from Australia to Great Britain were hoaxed. Could this be, like the platypus, something entirely new? Marine biologist Shay Conger weighs in.
To me, this looks like a type of snake. You can see that it's flicking its tongue in and out, and that's one of the main ways that snakes sense their environment is by essentially tasting the air or testing the chemicals in the water around it to see if there's food or danger. But there's something unusual going on to where it's coated in this green fibrous material. Snakes, because they're reptiles, don't have fur.
Conger says mammals need fur to keep them warm, but reptiles don't.
Reptiles actually use the heat of the environment around them to warm their bodies.
We turn next to wildlife biologist Stephanie Shuttler. If it's not fur, what is it?
It really looks to me to be more plant-like.
Sounds wild, but animals with vegetation growing on them are more common than you think.
There are turtles that get algae on them and other snake species that get algae on them. Sloths have algae throughout their fur. Polar bears, when it's warmer, their fur will also turn a greenish color from the algae. But the really remarkable thing is that this snake is pretty much entirely covered.
So how, and more importantly, why did this happen?
The snake had to be moving very slowly because the plant spores need to embed themselves into the skin to grow onto it. It protects them if predators can't see them, and it helps them catch more prey because the prey can't see them as well. It also makes them smell like the environment. They're essentially carrying the environment on them. It could be that this snake intentionally let the algae grow on it as a survival strategy.
Our verdict? Algal growth. This is one of those rare stories where the truth is just as fascinating as any legend. According to locals, this is a puffed-faced water snake. The next time it sheds, the algae will go with it, and a new bloom will need to take root on his body. Eisenhower State Park, Texas, 2015. One morning after some record-setting rain, a few rangers are checking the park's back roads when they discover this.
It's pretty gross and weird and disgusting.
At first glance, it almost looks like patties of ground beef, oddly arranged straight down the middle of the road. But look closer. Is that one wiggling?
They look to be giant masses of earthworms or annelids, segmented worms. I've honestly never heard of any type of behavior like this before.
So what are these worms doing and why? Since we couldn't ask them, Gerhard got to theorizing.
One interesting possibility is that we're looking at a spontaneous attempt at evolution. These worms are attempting to build a superorganism.
And these worms wouldn't be the first to try it.
One example would be something called a tunicate. This is a very primitive type of vertebrate that will actually join together and form a massive chain, tens of feet long, and there is an advantage to this in terms of locomotion through the water.
Social insects can do something similar, creating a group of synergetic organisms known as a superorganism.
In times of heavy flooding, you'll often see these complete islands of ants that join together. It's kind of a survival mode where these animals are able to collaborate in order to survive an extreme situation.
And who could forget bees, one of the better-known superorganisms, and the source of inspiration for the term hive mind? Perhaps these worms are exhibiting just that.
I think this is a great example of a very primitive life form, a worm, demonstrating that perhaps it has a level of conscious collective intelligence that is greatly underestimated.
Some scientists are starting to believe that the complex brains that you and I have could have evolved from the very first worms. So does that make worms smart or humans dumb? We'll let you make the call. As for these worm balls, we'll rely on the brains of our experts.
Wow.
First, Dr. Floyd Hayes considers the superorganism theory.
Worms can detect each other through olfactory cues, and they are attracted to larger groups of worms, so they like to socialize for some reason.
While worms do socialize to some degree, Hayes notes that true superorganisms are eusocial. They have designated individuals that reproduce and others that don't.
They have a very complex society. These worms are not examples of eusocial animals, so I would not classify them as a superorganism.
Okay, if superorganism isn't the right word, what is?
It's hard to understand why exactly they're gathered together in the road there. It may be drying up a little bit, and one potential benefit of grouping together would be that they could stay more humid for a longer period of time.
Dr. Hayes brings up an important point. Worms need moisture to live. The mucus on a worm's skin actually acts as a medium for oxygen absorption, meaning that in order to breathe, the worm cannot dry out. That's what makes the strange alignment of these worm balls the biggest mystery of all.
It's really strange that the worms seem to congregate in the center of the road almost perfectly. It is probably the driest part of the road. Roads are designed to mound in the center so that water can go off the road.
It's not adding up. If worms need moisture to live, why gather at the driest place available? So folks, we're stumped. While it's not unnatural for animals to herd together, this peculiar behavior is leading us to call this an unexplained phenomenon. In the end, Darwin concluded that despite their small size, worms are just as capable of shaping the landscape as any person. Frankly, after this, who knows what else they're capable of? In October 2017, a man is about to step into his sister's bathroom in Alor Setar, Malaysia, when he notices something crawling out of the toilet. The 28-year-old immediately rushes out to tell his sister, who whips out her camera and captures this video. The footage shows a strange, slithering creature emerging from the bathroom with its head poking out of the door. It surveys its surroundings before finally crawling out onto the tiled floor. Let's take another look. The creature appears to be about 6 feet long, with a small head, thick body, and a short tail. Field researcher Ken Gerhardt has studied river monsters, lake monsters, and now sewer monsters.
It's large, it's slimy and black. It's crawling out of a toilet. That's about as bad as it gets. People don't generally spend a lot of time, if any time, in a sewer. So we really don't have any idea of what types of creepy crawlies might be down there.
Gerhardt says the most persistent urban legend involves the sewers of the Big Apple.
There are accounts and rumors going back to the 1930s that describe sizable alligators actually living and breeding in the New York sewer system. There is one theory that perhaps these were pets that were somehow discarded and flushed down the toilet when they were small and then grew to massive sizes in the sewer.
Of course, not all sewer animals are monsters. Sometimes animals just get stuck in the sewers, trapped by size or circumstance. And everything from giant rats, feral cats, even cows, have been found in sewer systems around the world. And marine biologist Dr. Sheikh Conger says in Southeast Asia, giant snakes turn up down there too.
It's a really tropical, forested environment. In fact, it's been known that there have been snakes that have emerged from toilets or plumbing.
In fact, in 2019, this 14-foot cobra was found in a sewer in Thailand. Sewer creatures have been making headlines for decades. but it is rare to encounter anything this big and this disturbing. So could this be a giant snake? Or maybe just some form of camera trickery? Let's go to our video expert.
This recording has been compressed pretty heavily, so in layman's terms, it's too blurry to see anything to be able to identify exactly what we're seeing. However, in terms of authenticity of the way that the recording is playing and the way that the camera operator is capturing this object, I don't see anything to suggest it's been CGI'd or Photoshopped.
So if the video is real, is this thing a snake? Dr. Conger says we need to consider other slimy creatures known to slither across this part of the world.
Malaysia is home to amphibians that we call caecilians. And these are salamander-like animals that don't have limbs or any external appendages, so they look a bit like giant worms. These animals can actually get 5 to 6 feet long, but what you have in essence is an animal that's only a few inches in diameter. And so my idea that this could be some sort of caecilian goes out the window.
Conger has another thought that's even grosser.
Malaysia is pretty well known for its leeches, which are blood-sucking invertebrates. But if this were a leech, it would have to be 30 or 40 times bigger than a known species of leech, which I think is really unlikely.
Professor Floyd Hayes, who has been fascinated with snakes since childhood, is pretty sure he knows what we're looking at. And it's not some sort of mythical serpent.
There are quite a few different species of snakes in Malaysia. This one appears to be very thick-bodied, and there's not that many species that would look like this. It looks a lot like the elephant trunk snake.
Hayes says that the baggy skin, which gives the impression that it's too big for the animal, is the telltale sign. So our verdict? Based on its known habitat and size, we think the sewer monster is an elephant trunk snake. And while they usually make their homes near rivers and lagoons, this one chose a toilet instead. No accounting for taste.